Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew, and today I'm very excited to have on our channel Jason Blanchard, who many might know is an author. Maybe some of you guys know from the co-founder of Backdoors and Breaches, or co-creator. He's done conferences, he's done talks, he's done how to hunt a job like a hacker presentations, he's worked for SANS, he's worked for WB, prior military vet of 25 Victor, your videographer, cameraman, Jason. So Jason, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the channel, and we're so glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited. I just walked in the rain, so I came in, I sat down, I'm like, let's do this.
It's funny, I work East Coast hours, and a lot of my team's on the East Coast, so I am here in the beautiful and sunny, hot day of Arizona with 100-degree weather, and I know my whole team out right now in the East is they're in like DC, Virginia, and it's just raining.
62 degrees outside right now.
No, thank you. Yeah, anything to me, I guess, because I keep my room nice and cool, but I hate the cold. That's why I love Arizona. But 70 degrees, it is sweater weather. So, but yeah, Jason, so excited to have you here, and we'll go ahead and we'll knock off these questions to kind of get this conversation going. So, breaking into cyber is why I kind of pulled you in on this call, and some might be asking me, well, hey, like, is Jason's worked for SANS. He's worked in the military as a photographer. He's been doing marketing, and he has a magazine going, or a comic book right now as well out. The future is fill in the gap, but I wanted to bring in you, Jason, because I think the conversation and what you've been bringing to the community, and even to the broader and wider spectrum of folks trying to get into this field, has been huge. For those that have never heard or have not played Backdoors and Breaches, it is a beloved game that I started playing actually back in the States when I worked for the state of Arizona. And I thought it was an amazing, fun game. And I guess my first question for you, Jason, is what kind of spun the idea for Backdoors and Breaches, and how did that kind of get created?
Sure. So I was at SANS, and I was part of the penetration testing curriculum, and I got a chance to work with Ed Scotus. And Ed Scotus, if you don't know, creates the SANS Holiday Hack Challenge each year. He's a whimsical human being. I love Ed Scotus. And so while we were there, we created these posters that people would put on their walls, and they were useful and educational. And at one point, we were like, well, what if we turned a poster into a board game? And so we created a thing called pivots and payloads, and some people might have it, some people don't. But we were like, what if we took a poster and turned it into a board game that taught people about penetration testing? Like, as you went through almost a Candyland style, as you make your way through reconnaissance, and then exploitation, and then post-exploitation, and then even in the reporting phase. And then what could the defenders do at any given time that could cause you to go back to start, or cause you to go back to a previous phase? So we created this thing called pivots and payloads, distributed, and it was a fun, creative exercise. Don't know if it really caught on as a board game. I think it was visually appealing. But then John Strand asked me to come work at Black Hills, and I was coming right out of this pivots and payloads mindset of creating games and gamifying cybersecurity. And John had created this thing called cubicles and compromises. And okay. Yeah, so it was like the precursor to Backdoors and Breaches. And so now you're like pivots and payloads, cubicles and compromises. And it was essentially just hey, you play D&D? Just add cybersecurity to it. And then it had some basic rules. And I was like, John, I really think there's something here. There's something here that we can really do something with. So I would say in month 2, I went to Paul's Security Weekly. I went up to see Paul, and I was on the show, and they had a comic book store nearby. Went into the comic book store, and they had Dungeons and Dragons had cards. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize Dungeons and Dragons had cards. So I called John from the store, and I was like, John, we're going to make cards. And so he's like, okay. And then one day he just sent me a spreadsheet, and it had a whole bunch of crap in it. I had no idea what it meant. And he's like, that's the game. And I was like, okay. And so over the next 6 months of refinement and figuring it out and play testing and everything, we eventually had Backdoors and Breaches, and we gave it away for the very first time at DerbyCon 2019. And I still remember the day. There was a line from one side of the hotel to the other. We gave out 800 decks in 90 some minutes, I think.
Oh my gosh.
It was phenomenal. Also, we found typos immediately in the deck. which is why we released 1.1. And then like a couple months later, we were trying to figure out how to get it to people that couldn't make it to conferences. So we sent it to Amazon. We'd never distributed anything through Amazon. And we went through 2,000 decks in 23 hours.
Oh my gosh.
It was the #1 selling educational game on Amazon that day. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I always put it on my performance review. So, and that's how Backdoors and Breaches caught on. And then, like immediately after that, COVID happened. And all of a sudden, this game that we thought people were going to play in person stopped being played in person. And a guy from the community, Richard Fong, said, "Hey, I love your game. I got a copy of it at an event, but there's no way to play online. Do you mind if I make something? Like, is that okay?" I was like, "If you can, sure." And like 2 weeks later, he comes back and he's got play.backdoorsandbreaches.com. And it was like, what is this? We've been ever since. So if you go to play.backdoorsandbreaches.com, that's, Richard did the original code for it. We've, done some revamps since then. We got all the decks on there. But that's how it started. It was a board game, pivots and payloads, mixed with John's cubicles and compromises, mixed with Dungeons and Dragons cards, mixed with my background in comic books and filmmaking. And then we got the game out to everybody.
It's so funny because I think a lot of places, and I think probably around like 2019, 2020, the gamification of learning, and I think at least in cyber, really started to kind of take off. Like Try Hack Me, Hack the Box has been around for so long. There's now so many additional types of educational games or sites that now try to mimic, but it's so hard, I think, to really find a good medium to teach and train cyber in a fun, exciting, very much Dungeons and Dragons-esque way, which I mean, I've met a few cyber nerds that are not Dungeons and Dragons fans. I'd say they're non-believers. They just probably haven't played with a good Dungeons master. But a lot of folks I talk to, they love the game. So huge thank you for creating that and that story of it, because that's fantastic. And I guess the next question I have for you, Jason, so it's like getting to work at all these organizations and helping do all this marketing and getting to work for SANS. I know we talked briefly beforehand, like you've gotten to sit through a lot of the courses and trainings because you have to understand what you're talking about.
Sure.
When you think of the young generation, I guess now trying to break into cyber or anyone trying to break into a career field, what do you think are some of the most key factors when it comes into leveraging, like getting into your first SANS class? What should you be expected to learn? What should you be excited to learn about? What kind of stuff like that, I guess, did you learn from like working and getting to do all that stuff with SANS?
Yeah. There was a few years ago, I asked the community, what are the personality traits that you think people in cybersecurity should have? And the #1 was curious. That was the #1 thing out of all the other stuff. There was a lot of things, but curious just kept coming up over and over and over again. So it's natural curiosity. Why does this work? Why does that work? How's that work? What does this do? What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? So that's what I've been doing in marketing my entire career. Like, what if I do this? What if I make a game? What if I do this? What if I do this? So I just love the concept of like, what if, right? Like, what if this? What if that? What if these things? So for anyone getting started, it's like that natural curiosity. I went from being in comic books and filmmaking to being in cybersecurity. It was like December 31st, comic books and filmmaking. January 1st, I was in cybersecurity, and I was like, oh crap. Because I go to sit with Ed Scotus, and he's talking about what a penetration test was, and I was like, I don't know what any of this stuff means. I kind of understood OSINT like a little bit, and you're like, okay, so it's like cyber stalking, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But professionally.
Yeah. And it was, I think, 2 years into being in cybersecurity until I finally understood what an exploit was. And it was Steven Sims was giving a talk at B-Sides Charm, and he was talking about 1 days, not 0 days, but 1 days. And he was talking about how, Patch Tuesdays comes out on Tuesdays, and then they take a look at what the code was on Monday versus what the code is on Tuesday. And so they can go back and see, well, this was changed and this is still the same. And they were like, okay, so I can create an exploit here. And I was like, oh, it's the what if statements. It was like, if this, then this, if this, then this. And like, well, if the if is not good, like you could put something as the new that. And I was like, okay, finally. I've been doing this for 2 years and I finally understand what an exploit involves.
Together.
Yeah. But I got a chance to sit through a lot of classes. I would say with the amount of information on YouTube, I taught at a film school at some point, during my career, and we would teach our students stuff that was common sense, or you could learn it on YouTube. And there was a little part of like, you didn't need to come here. And they're like, oh, well, that was a lot of money. Yeah. And you needed to come here because you're not the kind of person who could have taught yourself on your own.
Yep.
So you have to like understand yourself. Like if you can teach yourself this on YouTube, then you would have taught yourself on YouTube. What most people need in the world is a guide. And if you don't have a guide, then you don't do the thing. If you were going to do the thing, you would have already done the thing. And so you need a guide. And a lot of times that's a teacher, or that's a mentor, or that's someone that just walks alongside you and helps you with where you need to get to. Like what you're doing right now, you're being a guide for people who don't know what to do next.
Yeah, and you said a big key word that I've really hit hard this year, and I've opened my doors to help with, is mentorship. And I think it's huge having a mentor and a teacher, because just like when I got into cyber 8 years ago, I was in law enforcement for the city of Phoenix. I made my pivot with the military. The military was my pivot. I enlisted as a 31 Bravo military police officer. Everyone hates them till you meet them. And I eventually learned, my brother was in the Marine Corps at the Naval Academy. He commissioned into Marine Corps cyber intelligence. He's like, hey man, you should go look into cyber, go do intelligence stuff. I'm like, okay. Got into OSINT, became an all-source analyst, attached to a cyber protection team with the CPTs. Home of our cybers out of Fort Eisenhower in Augusta, Georgia. And that's where my real interest started to kind of tie into. But with my mentors and my leadership within my unit, that's what really made me want to get my pivot. Like, hey, like law enforcement, I love law enforcement. Never will shame the field. God bless our officers, because it's a huge profession that we need across the states. But there's long nights. There's blood money, because I'd miss holidays, birthdays, trips, and I'd be writing reports and doing the type of work I'm doing. And my mentors are like, hey man, like, you could just go in like to incident response, or like be a SOC analyst, and like, you're kind of writing reports, kind of like you're doing for the police department, but you just be doing it for an organization or whatever place you work with, and they'd be your victim. And then you have to do an investigation, make sure it's clear and concise, standardized, systematic, so on and so forth. And I think that was a huge pivot point for me of getting into that field. But I think another thing too, Jason, that some people don't think of, so like you're very much, like you mentioned, like you're in marketing, you used to do comics, you're now in for Black Hills, you did Sands. People think of IT and security in these roles of like, I'm either an IT help desk, I'm a security analyst, or I'm a red team hacker. And those are like the only things you can do within cyber. And that's why I love talking to people that work inside this field, where it's like, look, like you work and you're meshed into this environment, and you're not out there maybe doing the pen test or doing the SOC reports, but you still need to inform and bring this information as kind of like a voice for that group. Or even like when you're trying to, as a new company, and you're on to be like a sled and do like sales, you still need to talk about it. You can still create and share that information. And so I think it's interesting when people, and I'm sure you've gotten this question many times, where they just come up to you saying, hey, how do I get to do what you do? How do I get into the field? Or what's my next step? And I think you hit the nail on the head kind of like, one, you have to be curious. Because if you're not curious and you're kind of just like waiting for that next handout, you might be sitting there for a while. Because a lot of the time, a lot of the things of what we do is we just ask why. If, then why? If, then why? And then you make the changes.
Yeah, one of the things I looked for when I first got into cybersecurity was the connectors. There are natural connectors in any industry. It's the people who go, oh, have you met this person? And when you choose to find the connectors, they will connect you with all the other people that you need to know. And so there's that mentorship, which is formal, and you can request it, you can ask for it, you can find mentors in your life that people like, I see what you're doing and I want to do what you're doing. How did you get to do what you're doing? And would you be able to help someone like me? And the reason why mentors help and connectors help is because I think people don't realize how long it is to get to where they're going. Yeah, I'm on like year 10 of being in cybersecurity. You know, as you mentioned before, like people know me. I'm well known. I've made Backdoors and Breaches, but I made Backdoors and Breaches 5 years ago, and we've been doing it since. It took 3 years to make this comic book that came out today. It took like years for this thing that we wanted to do for it to happen. And there's a great book out there called The Dip by Seth Godin. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's very small. It's a small book. It's like actually a small book. So it's The Dip by Seth Godin. And it talks about how human beings, we get real excited about the thing in the beginning. Super excited. And then that excitement wanes. And it gets hard. And it gets difficult. And during that difficult time, we think about quitting. And during that quitting time, other people quit around us. And if you push through the dip, you eventually come out on the other side more successful than all the other people who quit in the dip. And I'm really good. That's like, if I have a superpower, it's pushing through the dip. And a lot of times it's people around me who their enthusiasm, their excitement, the fact that they're not in the dip like I'm in the dip, and whatever it is, I will find a reason to get through the dip. Everyone experiences the dip. Get into cybersecurity, yeah, everyone's super excited to get into cybersecurity. Yep. It's really hard to push through cybersecurity through that dip. It's really exciting to create a comic book. It's really hard to create a comic book through the dip. Backdoors and Breaches went through a dip, like a serious dip, where people inside Black Hills, looking back on it retrospectively, you're like, oh yeah, this was a super success. But during the time where I'm like, and we're making this game called Backdoors and Breaches, and everyone's like it, there's people like, you sure? You spent a lot of time on this. And you're like, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. And so not everyone thinks you should push through the dip. And there's people in your life who are like, I don't know if you should keep doing this. And so if there's one superpower I have, and one thing I encourage other people to do, is that if there's something that you want to do, you got to push through the dip and know that the dip exists, and then push through it.
No, and that's a great pivot point for my next question is the future is the comic book. What was the mindset and so if you've not seen it just got released, I think this last month?
Today. Today is officially today.
All right,
yeah.
We were talking
May
about
28th.
Okay,
Whoever
awesome,
watching it.
Awesome. Yeah, so May 28th, the future is. So where can people find this first off?
It's available in 1,400 comic book stores around the world. There's about 600 comic book stores that really decided to order a bunch. And then there's a whole lot of them was like, I'll get one copy, see what happens. And we definitely wanted people to have one copy just in case people from the community went in looking for it. We didn't want them to be disappointed. So we encouraged people to get one copy at least. But it's available in 1,400 comic book stores around the world. We are distributed through the official comic book store distribution. It's called Lunar Distribution. We are a full-fledged comic book publishing company, like legit comic book publishing company with comic book creators. We speak at comic book industry events. We had John and I, it's you have to be a traveler, not a tourist. So if you choose to get into another industry, you have to look at it as I'm a traveler, not a tourist. And I think some people who are getting into cybersecurity are like, I'm a tourist in cybersecurity. Like, no, I'm a traveler in the world of cybersecurity. So if that could be a shift for anyone, it's a mindset of I'm not just looking around and enjoying.
That's a really good analogy. I like that a lot, actually. And it makes sense because you think of tourists, they're only here for a short time. And when this huge cyber industry, and where I'd say we're still in a very much boom, I'd say it's still a very much need and niche job. But it's just people think of it oh man, this is it. It's a great job. I can work hybrid remote. They make six figures. And then they see the journey. And just like you mentioned on that dip, it can be a long time to either get to that top, and then you can get up there, burnout super real. You're going to get to your first MSSP or a SOC because you're going to be a tier 1 analyst. You're going to work cases, 200 cases a week. And you're like, oh my gosh, this may have been a really nice visit. I don't know if I want to stay here that long. And
Sure.
here comes the bottom dip. And I love that analogy so much. Short little, maybe I don't want to call it a spoiler, but can you give us kind of a what's the story about?
So we've been trying to distill it down to explain to other people. It's like Mission Impossible meets Black Mirror and hackers.
Oh my God,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah, it takes place it's ambiguous. It's about 40-ish years into the future. And so it's the people who are living in that world 40 years from now. And what we were thinking through, why did we put it 40 years from now instead of it being a story about hackers now? is that we get a chance to focus on the technology that's coming. We get to think through how it's going to be misused, abused, and hacked. And we can start thinking through like how we can actually implement privacy, how we can implement security, how we can like think through those industries now. Like we are starting to become travelers in the world of AR and XR technology. We're becoming travelers in the world of like, it's not even AI, it's more of like how the AI is going to be implemented in humanoid robots. We're looking at how other futuristic technologies are working, and we're studying them, and we're like, what stories can we tell about how they can be misused, abused, and hacked? And it's exciting for us because we're a cybersecurity company. We're like, all right, so what's it going to look like? All right, and we had to make sure we didn't go too dystopian with it, right? Because 30 years ago wasn't very dystopian. Like we're not in a dystopian future of 30 years ago. And like it might suck a little bit more than it did 30 years, but it's not. There's good parts and bad parts.
It's not horrible.
Yeah, it's not horrible.
Yeah, there's still McDonald's and fast food, hopefully, so people will survive.
30, 40 years from now, there's a good chance it's going to be a lot like now. It's just different. And so it's the group of people that come together that are trying to make the world a bit of a better place. And so anyone who's in trouble can hire this team to go and help them. And they have backgrounds in hardware hacking or social engineering or being able to find the vulnerabilities in AR, XR technology. Most people at this time have implants, because over the next 40 years, implants become, instead of putting on glasses, you just have your implant. It creates the AR landscape for you. You can wear a skin. So you have your AR skin on. So if you want to look like an alligator at all times, you look like an alligator at all times, right?
That's funny.
So some people never take off their AR skin. They never want people to see them for who they really are. There's all kinds of like social commentary that we can infuse into the story that we're looking at. It's like, how are people going to try to cope with the technology that they have? And then, so without being a spoiler, one of the storylines is if you have an implant and you have a AR landscape and you're seeing things, could somebody cause you to see something that's not really there?
A hallucination kind of thing.
Yeah, so if someone's manipulating your implant, then essentially it's a horror story at that point.
Oof. Ugh.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong, because I think in California, because I think Kissimmee Valley and other stuff, like I've seen like there's like they have the implants like on their wrist or something where it's like a little tag. We can do like the Apple Pay and stuff. And then I swear there was like another one where someone's like did like the like a something in their eye. Yeah, the implants are real. They're coming. I think they're coming sooner than later, which is a real thing, which is just crazy to think of.
Yeah.
But no, that's interesting. So if I can ask Jason, if you could have one of the skills with one of the folks in the comic book, what skill would you have and why?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I identify, us, like we have a team, and we were recently on a van tour going from comic shop to comic shop, telling people about the series. And all of us in the tour were like, you're like Wheeler, and you're like Sally, and you're like, and I think we landed on, I'm like Eli, which is a little bit more of the, in the clouds, more of a dreamer, doesn't see the world the way that it actually is. He sees it the way he wants it to be. And he's coping with the way the world is and the fact that it's, but he sees risk everywhere. And so his thing is that he's like, well, that gun's going to misfire. It's got a 42.8 system. Like he is constantly seeing risk. He's constantly seeing vulnerabilities, constantly seeing things that, so I guess I identify with Eli. And by knowing the risk, I think it helps you push through the dip better. Like when you understand the risk and you're like, well, that risk isn't that bad, or that risk is terrible, but the other side of that risk is way better. So I think I identify with Eli.
I love that. And I think when it comes to risk, it's like when folks look for that next role where they think about getting into cyber. Like I did a career change, and a lot of folks that I've talked to on this channel, they make that career hop, leaving from one job to the next. They're leaving a different, they went to school for this job. They've been doing it for 5-6 years. There's the mentality, well, I need to do this for 20-25 years, get my retirement. Do I really want to do a career change? It's the what if. It comes into the risk of chance. Like, okay, well, no risk, no reward. Is the grass greener on the other side kind of mentality. And no, that's awesome, Jason. I guess my last question for you before I ask my last and final fun question for the show is, when it comes to your time creating this comic book, what was your highest point of like, this is going to be awesome? Or was there any fears of the, oh no, what if this just blows up in our faces?
Cool.
And the backing, I guess, behind the question is so just like career changing, right? There's always the uncertainty of the what if. So like, was there any kind of, I guess, uncertainty or doubt of kind of fears of what would happen of like what the horrible what if, or you know what, or what if this completely goes in a positive way and just blows up in a positive way?
Yeah. So I'll give you my what if where I think this is going to be successful. I had a chance to go to a comic book retailer gathering. So 200 retailers from around the country, around the world, gathered in California to talk about comic book retailing, but also each publisher had a chance to speak and present and introduce, their concept. And we took a risk and paid for like a 25-minute slot. So it was like $5,000 to pay for a 25-minute slot. And almost everybody was like, don't do that. You have one book. What are you going to talk about for 25 minutes? And I was like, oh, I'm good. I got it. So what I did is I got up there and I did an introduction. I was like, hey, y'all, even though I'm coming from a cybersecurity company, I came from comic books. I learned about community building and content creation and storytelling all from being in a comic book store. This is where I came from. But now I'm in cybersecurity. So here's what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes. I'm going to teach you how to not get hacked. And I stopped the presentation talking about the book and I said, here's password policies. And we started talking about password policies. And I was like, here's a good password versus a bad password. And we started talking about passwords. And all of a sudden, cameras started coming out and people were taking pictures of the screen. And I was like, all right, so now, for those of you that have multiple stores and you have multiple, let's talk about password managers, all right? Yep. And we started talking about that. And we was like, okay, if you have public Wi-Fi, turn it off. There's no need for you to have public Wi-Fi in 2025. People can use their own hotspots. And you can see people are on the phone right now, turn off the Wi-Fi, right? And so I went through the top 10 things that you could do as what happens if your social media account gets breached? What happens if you get locked out? What happens if this? And I just went through and I taught them simple techniques to be cyber safe, essentially.
Yep.
And then the last one was hire shoplifters to shoplift your store. Hire people that you trust to come into your store and rob you. And don't tell your employees that it's happening, but give them what is your shoplifting policy? What is this? What is that? What is these things? And then have people break into your, essentially rob you. And then if they got away with a whole bunch of stuff, all right, how did you get away with all that stuff? How did you do this? How did you do that? And then allow the shoplifter to get caught. On attempt number 4, allow the shoplifter to get caught. And then I brought it all back and I was like, and that's what hacking is. People hire us to break into their stores, essentially into their organizations. That's what pen testers are. We're professional thieves. And so at the end of that, we gave you a report of all the ways that it worked and the ways that we didn't. And so all of a sudden, everyone in the room was like, oh, that's what, okay. And I was like, and so here's the story that we have coming out called The Future Is.
Oh man, that's a killer pitch. And
yeah,
I'm so excited to see this, by the way. And I'm going to be probably today. I'll probably be calling around a few of my comic book stores here in Arizona. Cause I have young kids too, right? And it's just I think of comic books too. And I think of the younger generation. There's going to be obviously a few of us 90s kids that I love comic books. They're awesome. But also just teaching the younger generation. Cause same thing for my family and my friends. I am the cyber thought process for all my buddies. Hey, get a password manager. Turn off your Bluetooth if you're not using your Bluetooth. Turn off your Wi-Fi. Your public Wi-Fi. Guys, there's easier ways to do this. Don't use the same password for 10 different accounts. Change it up. And it's so silly when you start talking, for those of us that have been in the industry for, I'd say longer than a year or two, they're very common, very easy things to kind of just think and to go, yep, if I implement these. But then there's the 80-90% outside that aren't in IT and cyber that they're not doing that. They use the same password for all the multiple accounts. They don't turn on multi-factor authentication. They're opening those emails for the free Netflix premium account for 3 months, and they're putting in all their credential information. Then they're like, I have this weird random charge on my credit card that I didn't authorize, but somehow it got used. And I'm so excited to hear that when you had those talks at those comic book conventions, and that's how the pitch went, and to see all the folks like just nod their heads, they're taking the photos, they're engaged. It makes me so happy because it's like at the end of the day, that's most of the time what these conversations and calls even are, is it's information sharing, it's understanding what the next steps look like, it's going through this long journey rather than being hold on, you just said it earlier. Don't tell me, being a traveler, not a. All right, help me out, Jason. What was the
Sure.
phrase? Taurus.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget it. But no, that's awesome. And with that, Jason, we're roughly out of time, but I have two fun little last questions for you. So when you are not working, when you're not pitching cybersecurity comics, when you're not having to go do conferences and talks, what does Jason like to do for fun? What do you do to unwind?
I it's one of those you're like, oh God, no.
Everyone's like, what is unwind? What is not working?
I do go hiking, at least one very long series of hikes each year, where I get a chance to go out in nature. I climbed Half Dome last year, so it's in Yosemite. It was 19.6 miles round trip in one day. It was like climbing the Empire State Building 5 times. Like just straight up, it was a rough day. But you get up there and you're like, I feel, if you've ever put on VR goggles and all of a sudden like the world looks fake, like at the top of Half Dome, the world looks fake. You're like, this isn't real. This isn't a real place. So hiking, getting out, going to places that I've never gotten a chance to experience before. And I essentially don't have any devices because I'm in the middle of nowhere. I can't do work, even if I wanted to do work, because it's not even possible. And then I have a terrible addiction to a game called Age of Empires.
Okay, nice. That is a good classic, man. Heck yeah.
Yeah, and I just found out that it's available on PS5, and I was good. I was good for like 2 years, pretty straight. But as soon as I found that, I've been playing Age of Empires again because it's so good for my ADHD. Being able to focus on 17 things all at one time is like the only way I function. So that's what I like to do.
No, awesome, Jason. Yeah, me and my buddies have recently just spun up Helldivers 2 again because of the attacks on Super Earth. Got to protect the world. And then I have an unhealthy amount of hours in Baldur's Gate 3. So very unhealthy amount of hours. But it's a fun game, and patch 8 came out, and I'm doing my last whole playthrough for it. So, but Jason, huge thank you. As a thank you, of course, that I offer for folks that come on the channel for me getting to steal some time from you. I'm going to send you a cool little piece of Ginger Hacker swag as a thank you for coming onto the channel.
Thank you.
And I guess last but not least, what advice would you give somebody that is trying to break into cyber?
Advice to people trying to break into cyber would be OSINT. Like there's something about being able to understand who is who and where do they work and why do they work there. And I'm not telling you to cyberstalk the people inside cybersecurity, but I'm also telling you to cyberstalk the people in cybersecurity. Like when I first got in, I was like, well, who are the connectors, right? I found a guy named Tony Turner. I've told this story multiple times. Tony Turner was the organizer for B-Sides Orlando. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hi, I'm Jason. I'm new to cybersecurity and I'm looking to get connected into the industry. What advice do you have for me? So I would say my number one advice is find your local B-Sides. Find the people who run your local B-Sides. Reach out to the people who run your local B-Sides and say, hi, I'm new to this industry. This is I'm looking to get in. Who do I talk to? How do I volunteer? How do I participate in the local B-Sides? And I don't know how B-Sides spread. If you don't know what B-Sides is, look it up, B-Sides Security Conferences. But could you imagine if there was like a B-Sides for comic book creating, or there was a B-Sides for marketing? Like marketing, I'm sorry, but marketing is always like marketing people talking about marketing to marketing people about marketing. It's not great. But cybersecurity B-Sides events, you're like, you're just freely sharing knowledge and hanging out and making the world a better place. Like, this is incredible. So my number one advice for people getting started in cybersecurity is find your local B-Sides, find the organizers for those B-sides, introduce yourself to those people, and get connected.
Awesome, Jason. And yeah, if you've not heard of B-sides, definitely Google it. You'll find a ton of information on it. And with that, hey everyone, thank you so much for sticking around. If you've made it this far in the video, as always, hit like, hit subscribe, message on a comment what your favorite part was, and I will see you on the next episode of Breaking into Cyber.